Hey guys, Fletch here, bringing you another Fletch Talks video, and this video is going to be continuing on this little mini-series that I'm doing on my Premier League predictions for the upcoming 2020-2021 season. We talked about relegation in the last video that I did. We talked about who I believe will be relegated from the Premier League for this upcoming campaign. This video is going to be the exact opposite. It's going to be focusing on who I believe deserves to be within the discussion for potential winners for the new season. We're going to be looking at a few teams who I believe deserve to be within the discussion, and I will obviously give my opinion on who I believe will actually win it. So without further ado, let's get into it. And to kick things off, we're going to begin by looking at last year's winners, Liverpool. They are not going to be defending their title. They are more going to be attacking and fighting for it once more. Those are the words of Jurgen Klopp, the Liverpool manager, of course, who last season helped the Reds to a phenomenal campaign in which they steamrolled to their first title in 30 years. They took their foot off the pedal a little towards the end of last season, but maybe you can understand why that was the case. That title was already won a long time before the season actually ended. They wrapped it up, so it'll be interesting to see if that was the case and whether that was the reason why they took their foot off the pedal a little, or whether teams just started to slightly more find them out. But we'll wait and see if that is to be the case. Of course, you have your usual suspects to watch this season because of lack of transfer activity, which I'll go on to in a second. But of course, key players to look out for, of course, the main front three in Sadio Mane, Roberto Firmino, Mo Salah. You can pretty much guarantee that they'll be starting, so any fantasy football players out there, you know, at least one of them will be definitely in your team. Trent Alexander-Arnold from right back, Andy Robertson from left back, of course, key players for Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool. Virgil van Dijk at the heart of the defence, of course. But I also think that two players in particular that could have very huge seasons ahead are both Naby Keita and Takumi Minamino. Keita found a decent spell of form towards the end of last season, and I think that he just needs to get a bit of a consistent run of games under his belt to really display what he can do and why the Reds desperately wanted him at the time that they bought him, and of course bought him with the fee of around £50 million, of course. So I think it'll be a big season for the midfielder, and I also think it'll be a big season for Minamino, who took a bit of time to integrate into the squad, but fortunately for them they bought him in January, of course, and I think he was definitely bought for the upcoming campaign ahead. He's shown flashes of what he can do, but I think that thanks to that time, obviously getting used to the team, used to the league, and used to his new players, and obviously his pre-season, which he's been in fine form of, by the way. It'll be interesting to see how he fits in this year, especially considering that he'll either be playing instead of Firmino or with Firmino, depending on how Klopp sees his tactics going for particular games and whether he decides to change it up a little. Be interesting to see how he goes about doing that over the course of the campaign. New signings, of course, in Kostas Tsimikas, a left back, an area that needed strengthening. But like I say, other than that, there's not been a great amount of change in terms of personnel at Anfield. They needed a squad player for left back, and they achieved that. The Thiago rumours are still flying around. They refuse to go away, but it doesn't appear anything is happening right now. And if that does happen, it'll be a fantastic signing for the Reds, no doubt about it. But again, it does seem like another year of very little transfer activity, and maybe questions need to be asked about this area of business, particularly given how Liverpool's rise has happened over the past 5 years under Klopp. I just hope it doesn't become a thing of being a stale and repetitive environment for the players, and that they become lazy and unmotivated. I noticed that under Mauricio Pochettino at Tottenham, that kind of happened over there, where the players didn't seem to be playing for him much in the past. They didn't seem to enjoy some of the tactics and training that they were happening because it became stale and it became repetitive. I just hope that isn't going to be the case for Liverpool and that teams start to find them out because of this. But ultimately, I think it boils down to, will Liverpool make it back-to-back league titles? If they do, They won't run away with it like they did last season. They have a huge target on their back, and every team will be out to get them regardless of where they are on the table. City have strengthened, Chelsea have clearly strengthened, Arsenal have strengthened, United are looking to strengthen, and these are all teams that will be looking to hit the same levels of Liverpool, whether it's in the immediate future or the long-term future. The Reds will need to watch out for these teams in particular, I believe. And of course, you know that the Anfield crowd is going to be a miss for the Reds, especially if empty stadiums drag on further into the season. The big games will be a miss for the huge atmosphere that they create. Red supporters give and provide, and it may give a bit more of an encouragement sign to the quote-unquote lesser teams of the league. Will Liverpool and league titles be like buses where you wait ages for one and two come along at once? Only time will tell. Next, we move on to Manchester City, and their season last year was well documented as coming second in the Premier League with only the Community Shield and the League Cup to show for it. They experienced disappointment in the Champions League with an exit to Lyon in the quarter-finals and lost the FA Cup semi-final to the eventual winners in Arsenal for that competition. Pep Guardiola said towards the end of last season that City are miles behind league leaders Liverpool, and to be honest, I don't think he was just talking about the points difference between the two clubs at the time either. We talked about how their season was well documented last season. It wasn't the best campaign for both City and or Guardiola in that respect, and that quote alone seems to be suggesting it was another cry for help to his owners to give him more money in order to strengthen in the summer transfer window, and they've certainly done that. The additions of both Ferran Torres and Nathan Ake, the two standout ones in particular, with Torres being a winger that adds options to that area of the pitch, whilst Ake is a centre-back, of course, who strengthens an area that was quite clearly City's Achilles heel last season, are just two of the deals that have happened this summer at the Etihad. And with rumours constantly flying around, it doesn't seem like City's transfer business is done there yet either. And it'll be interesting to see how they press on with these kind of things in the coming weeks as the transfer window does close in early October. As for the players still there, of course, last season's Player of the Year, Kevin De Bruyne, he will certainly be the key man once again for City, the man to watch. And again, referring back to fantasy football, he will certainly be in the majority of players' teams, of course, as will the rotational forwards of both Sergio Aguero and Gabriel Jesus. We know how Guardiola likes to shake things up at times, keep their opponents on their toes by choosing one or the other, and sometimes it can be frustrating for fantasy football players, and sometimes it can pay dividends to both the club and Guardiola if one of these players does start and ends up being the match winner. There are also going to be big seasons ahead for the likes of Raheem Sterling and Aymeric Laporte. Laporte, of course, was hit by a lot of injuries last year, and he will hope to remain injury-free this year. And of course, you can't look any further in midfield over there on Kevin De Bruyne, obviously, than Phil Foden. He's really burst onto the scene in recent months, and now with the departure of David Silva, he looks to probably be attempting to fill his shoes, so it's another big season ahead for the young Englishman. But these are really all the key players that City have at their disposal, and they will certainly be ones to watch for the forthcoming campaign, and will be vital if City want to bring the Premier League title back to the Etihad for this current campaign. There was a lot for Pep Guardiola and Manchester City to deal with last season, not just on the pitch but off it too. Of course, I'm mainly talking about Manchester City's trial against UEFA for alleged breaches in financial fair play laws. Guardiola cut a very frustrated figure at times during the last campaign. His cool wasn't kept at all times during the last campaign. He constantly made strange references. He was constantly referring to Liverpool at times, even when questions didn't really refer to Anfield or anything to do with Liverpool at all. And of course, he was lashing out at various teams and people for seemingly being against Man City at times, and especially with the whole lengthy court case that happened towards the end of last season, he seems to have a lot of people to prove wrong and get some footballing revenge on, whether it's in terms of various people or clubs, especially because the majority of Premier League teams were against City during that whole trial fiasco. But of course, you just feel that maybe Guardiola's eyes are once again more fixated on the Champions League more so this year. Of course, they'll be looking to compete on multiple fronts, and let's face it, they certainly have the squad to do that. But if you offered him a choice of either the Premier League title or the Champions League title before the season's even begun, he would snap your hand off that is currently holding the Champions League, I'm sure of that. It's a trophy that surprisingly he's only won twice in his whole management career. Never won it with Manchester City as of yet, but I'm sure he will definitely be looking to add that to his collection this campaign. But the main question in terms of a Premier League situation for City is, can they bring the title back to the Etihad? Only time will tell. And the third team we're going to be putting under the microscope is Chelsea. Frank Lampard's first league season and his first season with the club that made him a superstar ended with a 4th place finish, and of course in doing so helped them towards Champions League football for this current upcoming campaign in slightly more difficult circumstances. When he arrived, Chelsea were under a transfer ban. They had sold their best player in Eden Hazard, and in doing so, Lampard was forced more or less to put his faith in some of Chelsea's youth prospects, their youth players. And ultimately, though, it kind of paid off. Some of those players went on to make a bit of a name for themselves in the last campaign. You're thinking of the likes of Mason Mount, Tammy Abraham, Reece James. They were certainly all big players that played a part in Chelsea's 4th place finish during the last campaign. They broke through and they made themselves a bit of a regular member in the Chelsea first team. But now that money is back on the table for the Blues, and with the current global situation seemingly playing into Chelsea's hands a little, in terms of a business sense of course, it gives them kind of the upper hand going into this transfer window. However, in doing so, the pressure is now seriously on them and the manager, the club as a whole. Chelsea have spent over £200 million on transfers this summer, which is incredible to think about, considering that not many teams are buying during this transfer window because of obviously the global situation and how badly it's affecting everybody, everything, and football clubs are no different. And the players they bought have got Blues supporters frothing at the mouth. Hakim Ziyech, Timo Werner, Ben Chilwell, Kai Havertz and Thiago Silva. They are just 5 names that have come walking through the door at Stamford Bridge this summer. 5 huge names that are set to, on paper at least, set the Premier League alight, and it'll be interesting to see if they can live up to their names, their potential, and it will be interesting to see how they gel as a team. And they don't appear to be stopping there either. There are still rumours going around that Chelsea are after a goalkeeper, and they're always keeping their eye out for someone new and exciting that will probably fit their mould. But it does seem that Roman Abramovich has put a lot of faith in Lampard to make the right transfer decisions in order to bring the Premier League back to Stamford Bridge this season. But, like I say, with great power comes great responsibility. And if Chelsea don't win anything this season, it could be looked at as a huge failure by the club and the manager. It's an exciting side that Chelsea have managed to put together this year. On paper, of course, it should at least bridge the gap between where Chelsea were their last campaign to the likes of Manchester City and Liverpool, who are obviously clearly head and shoulders above the rest. A challenge for the league should be a minimum, but will that be the case? Integrating a large quality or quantity of players has and always will be a difficult task to achieve. It does take time for everybody to gel, but with only just scraping top 4 last season through the help of lockdown and missing out on the FA Cup after losing to Arsenal in the final, the pressure's been seriously turned up on Frank Lampard just a few little notches more. As last season you could look at certain circumstances and give him a bit of a let off. I've already talked about the transfer ban and the selling of his best player. they were certainly issues that Lampard had to deal with, and you could look at and go, alright, it wasn't the ideal situation to walk into, so we'll let him off a little bit on that. But this season, there is nowhere to hide. There is nothing to hide behind this season. There are no more excuses that Lampard can offer. At the bare minimum, you'd expect that with the money spent, a trophy and a challenge for the league. I'm not necessarily saying a win for the Premier League. I'm saying a definite long-term challenge for the league is probably the bare minimum that Chelsea fans expect, and I think a lot more of neutral fans, rival fans will be looking at them and going, well, they spent all this money, let's see how they can deal with it. If they miss out on the league by a goal difference ruling, or by a point or something after having a near perfect season, similar to what Liverpool and City had a couple of years ago, then maybe you can hold your hands up and go, you know what? They did their best. The other team deserved it. They'll just try again next season. You just have to take them ones on the chin. But if that's not to be the case, it will be a massive failure, like I say. Yes, it will be tough, but that's the risk you take when you pump your club of mega money in order to improve it. The question here, of course, is will they be able to topple both City and Liverpool for Premier League glory? We wait and see. Elsewhere, I think you can look at also potential dark horses to consider for the Premier League title. Dark horses such as Manchester United. Yes, they have their issues. Yes, they are looking to recruit more players in this window to improve their squad depth. I think that is a bit of an issue for them because I think that the drop-off between their first team and their second team is pretty big. So I think that will be a problem the later into the season that they go. I also think their mentality against some clubs is questionable. Sometimes they'll pick up some decent results against teams that you wouldn't expect them to pick up good results against. And sometimes they will drop points against some teams that you think that they would definitely stand a very, very, very good chance of winning. So that's a bit of an issue for them as well. I think their main aim for this season should be a top 4 finish. But let's face it, stranger things have happened. And this could be a season where everything gets just thrown out the window, chucked up in the air. And it could be a crazy season depending on how things go outside of football, of course. And that's why I'm putting Arsenal as my dark horses as well. Although, again, getting back into the top 4 should be their main priority. They've certainly started to turn a bit of a corner under Mikel Arteta in terms of their mentality and their defending. And, of course, with that star man up front in Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, anything certainly is possible. I don't expect these two teams to get anywhere near winning the title. But I think that within the discussion, dark horses certainly fits their category. Now, as far as my prediction goes, there's been a little bit of a war inside my head because I've been going back and forth over this question so many times. Who will win this year's Premier League? I've been going back and forth, like I say, and eventually I did reach a final conclusion, and there may be a tiny bit of bias involved in what I'm about to say. But I genuinely think that Liverpool will win the Premier League title once again this season. But in my opinion, it will be a close run thing. I just think their mentality is something unmatched by any other Premier League club. And whilst they will face stiff competition this season, more so than ever from the likes of Manchester City and Chelsea in particular, the experience from not just last season of winning the title, but also the experience of the season before where they only just missed out on the title by a point, may be something that collectively helps them this campaign. I think that Klopp is the right man to motivate these players to go again for this season. And when you look at their rivals, Chelsea and City in particular, their defences on either side do not fill me with a lot of confidence, or I'm entirely convinced by them as a whole, as a unit. They're still questionable, and I think also when you look at City in particular, their frame of mind or mentality is something that I think is a point against them. And you can see that in the way that their players and their manager constantly speak out about Liverpool in particular within mainstream and social media. Liverpool seem to be living rent-free in these guys' heads. And all of these things, I believe, contributed to City's poor season last year. If you remember correctly, City lost 9 times during the last campaign despite finishing second. Any other manager may have been sacked for having that kind of stat. But of course, it's Pep Guardiola, so... Well, it's Pep Guardiola, so there was no way he was going to be sacked, even despite finishing with 9 losses to his name. Anyway, regardless, Liverpool are by no means perfect. No way am I saying that they are the finished article, they are the perfect article. No way am I saying that. But despite the lack of investment, I believe that this squad, this club, have the quality of players already there. And that goes hand in hand with the right mindset and mentality. And I think that also goes hand in hand with the right coaching staff. And of course, I believe them to have the best football manager that football as a whole has to offer right now in Jurgen Klopp to make sure that they win back-to-back Premier League titles. My prediction is Liverpool, but either way, that's my prediction on what I think will be an extremely close 3-horse race type of season with an exciting season ahead nonetheless. And with that, that wraps up this video on who I believe deserves to be within a discussion and who I believe will actually win the Premier League title for the upcoming 2020-2021 Premier League season. But of course, this is just one man's thoughts and one man's opinions on this particular topic. I want to know what you guys think. Who do you think deserves to be within the discussion of winning the Premier League title, and who do you actually believe will win the Premier League title for the upcoming campaign? Leave your thoughts, your comments, predictions and opinions down below in the comments section. I'd love to read them. Go back and watch my other video on this mini-series where I talk about the relegation candidates for the upcoming season. That was an interesting video as well, and I'd love to know your thoughts on that one, on that area as well. And of course, look out for the next video in this mini-series where I'll be talking about European football places and who I think will have a strong contendership for those places this season. Otherwise, hit that like button on the way out if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're new or want to see more content like this. Both things would be greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening. I've been Fletch. This has been another Fletch Talks video. And I will soon speak with you all again soon in another video.